Everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Campaign management is probably one of the most important parts of Donman. It's pretty well central to the system, just as a ledger code is central to an accounting system. A campaign code is basically what Donman revolves around. It's the thing that we have to evaluate. It's the thing we use to say, how well have we done? You know, did this campaign do better than the last campaign? Did this segment do better than the last segment? Is this something we've done better than before? Which bit of our work has done the best so that we can then plan for the future? That is so important that it really merits a webinar like this where we just spend time and go through every single aspect of campaigns, how to set them up, how to use them. So today Gary's going to take you through every aspect of campaigns, and I hope you'll find it useful. And if you've got any questions, please ask us at the end or contact us at any time using support. And now I'll pass it over to Gary.
Good afternoon, everybody, or where you may be, maybe earlier in the morning. Give me 1 second and I'll just get my screen organised here. So as Andrew said, primarily what we're looking at today, and today's subject is to do with the campaign management, setting up campaigns, setting up your letters, working out how it sort of works when you do the mail merge for your receipting in Word, etc. So on my particular menu, I've got campaign set up here as one of my, basically one of my user buttons on the front screen. If per chance you've got the raffle system and volunteers, those two buttons will be reassigned. But in that case, I'd have to go through the main menu. This will normally then be your organisation name, fundraising, and then down on the left you'll have campaign setup. So it really will take you to the same place no matter how you get there. When we go into that menu, the very first option on the menu is thank you letter code. So this is really where we start in order to get down to the campaign. So I need to have these other components in place so that the campaign record is what's going to tie them all together for me, so when I'm processing, etc. So if we look at the thank you letter code, first, go into that screen, click on the drop-down button at the side, will then show the letters that are set up in the system. Okay, so people that have got systems that have been around for quite a while may find that instead of having nice alphanumeric codes like the member one, the merchandise, etc., you may have numeric codes where it's just letter 1 to 10. But the trouble with that is, as you can see on the screen here, letter 1 is there, then I have 10 down to 14, and then I have letter 2. So they're not really in sequence, and unfortunately that's purely to do with the way that computers show numbers. Okay, so it goes from the top. But there's no reason and there's no real difference except for your own readability to give it a nice English name. So for all of these codes where I've got bequest, estate, gen, in-mem, member, etc., at the top of the screen you'll see the master code name is letter. Yeah? So all of these relate to a physical document in Word called letter, whatever the code is. Yeah? And that's primarily so that when we do the merge, you'll have your receipt template and everyone can get the appropriate letter for what they've given me money for. Okay? So if you didn't have a code there related to the mailing that you, the receipting, that you want to do, all you need to do is type in a new one. In my case, I like to put the underscore. So we've got 8 characters that we can use for the code. If I use the underscore, makes it much easier when I get into Word. So in this case, if I just call it test, my description will be test thank you letter. Okay, so when you create the new code, just enter through and leave the 2 questions there where it's got archive. You say, no, I don't want to archive it because I'm just creating it. And the next one will be displayed in the pop-up list will be yes. If perchance, and this flows anywhere through the system, if perchance you later had letters in there that you said, look, I'm never going to use them again, but I don't want to get rid of the code, you can go through. In the case of here, I've got my general thank you letter, which is my old one, because I've now got a new one at the top here. So what I can do is, if I go into letter 1, if I knew for sure that I've actually deleted that letter from the system and I'm not using it anymore, I have got the option to delete the code. And on the keyboard template that hopefully everyone's got, you'll see Shift F6 will allow you to delete that code. If I said, no, I don't want to delete it, I just want to basically hide it, I can enter through, in this case, say archive the code so it can't be used basically for any records after today, and say, no, I don't want to show it in the pop-up list. If I enter and save that now, bring up my list again, okay, so you'll now see the letter 1 is not there anymore. However, if I just type that in and enter, I can see the code itself is still in the system. So in this case, if I escape out, it will take me back to the menu. Once I've created my new code, the very next option I need to do is create the actual thank you letter. So if you click on this particular one, it'll come up saying load your word processor, and in this case it's still got old text there. We're saying, save your letter and save it as letter 1 to 99, but it's now save it as letter whatever the code may be. So if I continue, it will just take me into Word. And of course, if you've got Word open already, that's much quicker. So from there, if I'm starting a brand new document, the actual receipt letter itself normally doesn't need to have the date, the name and address and the citation in. It just starts at line 1 down to where the signature will be. And so if I'm just going to say this, okay, so it'll really just be the guts of your letter, and apart from my bad spelling up the top here. Okay, so just change the letter to suit, okay, and go through. With the newer versions of Word, there is a bit of a thing that catches quite a few people out. When I now go to File, Save, my computer's decided to have a big think about saving this document. Just bear with me. Anyway, while I'm waiting for Word to respond, for some reason it's corrected, but by default, this version of Word will save the document and the extension will be docx, so it won't be doc like previous versions. Okay, so you'll notice down the bottom of the screen, it's got a docx there. If everyone who is going to have access to doing the receipting has got the newer version of Word, that's going to work quite well, and basically I would then rename all of my documents to be called letter whatever it was and have a docx. In the receipt template, which we'll have a look at shortly, and the field is that says go and find the letter that this person should get for their receipt, I then have to change that to go and look for whatever the document is with the docx extension, not the doc. In this case here, the first thing I'd have to do is change that to a Word 97-2000, so you can now see the different extension. Go and change my folder to say, okay, I want to save that into my Donman work directory, and you can see there's already some letters. Okay. So just call it exactly the same as the code. If perchance you've called it something different and you go to do the merge, you'll get to the point where it says there's an error, and the merge will bring up the errors, and you'll get an actual error on the merged document saying, can't find the letter. And we'll have a look at how to address that. So in this case, if I just save that, I've now saved the text of my letter, and that's ready to go. I can close down Word, and that'll just take me back to the menu. Okay. The next option down on the menu is Chart of Account or Ledger Code. And this code exists in Donman purely so that I can tie in with the accounting system. So if perchance you're in a hospital, you might be using cost center codes for, this list of codes here to say, this is where money goes as far as me splitting it internally. If you're using MyOb or QuickBooks or something like that, Oracle, it really doesn't matter. The code is here just to match in with the accounting system. The code length itself is 16 characters, so there's very few places that we've found that hasn't been long enough to, be able to cover all of the different scenarios of codes that you might like. On the code itself, so you can see the top one here is just 4-1000. It's got telemarketing donations. The very last column here has got a D, an E, or an N. If I go into the top one and saying, this is my code matching my accounting code, The description should be exactly the same description. Again, I've got the options to say, do I want to archive it? And I'm saying no. And yes, I want it displayed in the pop-up list. The next question is one that's unique to this particular type of code, so the chart or ledger code, as you'll hear it called different names, but it's the same thing. You've then got the option that says, is it deductible, non-deductible, or exempt? So basically, if it's a straight donation, it will be marked deductible. If it's something that has GST, because it's a merchandise sale or a ticket sale or something along those lines, and there's GST implications there, then you say it's not deductible, and the system then will calculate the GST when I do the receipting, as well as when I do reports. Okay? So if we enter through, so at any time at all, you can go in and have a look at the codes you've got. Just like the other codes, if I wanted to create a new one, instead I'm going to create 4-2000. Okay, if I've already got that code, it will come up automatically. Okay, otherwise just type in the new code, type in the description, enter through, and decide again whether the money that comes into this GL code will be deductible or not. And normally that's dictated by your accounting people. So they'll say, the money that comes in is a straight donation. We've just got a code so that we can report on it later, and we can then try and reconcile Donman against the accounting system. If you wanted to print a list of the codes that are here, again down the bottom of the screen you've got the print code button. You can then click on that, and that'll just spit the whole list out to the printer. So if we escape, again, will take me back to the menu. The next item down on the menu is bank account codes. So this is normally where I would then have my bank account, the bank name, the account name. So if I had multiple accounts, I could put that in there. The BSB number for that account, and if I'm using just the normal slips to do the credit cards, I would then have the merchant numbers in here attached to this bank account so that I can produce the credit card slips for doing the actual banking when I'm doing the deposit. Yeah. So you can have any number of bank accounts in there, and quite a few organisations do, where you might have one for raffle money, you might have one for certain sorts of trusts that go into different accounts, etc. If I then go into the campaign code, this is what starts to tie all of those things together for me. So in this case, I'm just going to call it my test appeal. Okay. When I've got the campaign code, that's really just saying this is the income stream for this particular thing that I'm setting up. The group code can be changed pretty much at any time at all, and the group is there to help me sort of put a whole lot of money together. So you can see in this case here, I've got a group called Pledge and another one called Pledges. So it just means somewhere one of my campaigns haven't been set up the way that I'd like, because what I want to be able to do later, and the same with raffle and raffles, is go through and say, okay, I want to do a report on this sort of money, so I might have a whole lot of things that have gone into donations or events or membership, etc. If I've used the groups properly, that makes that a whole lot easier for me, because then I can report on a group of campaigns. If perchance I'm having an event like a ball or something like that, and as part of the ball I've got a number of different aspects. I've got ticket sales, I've got sponsorship, I've got donations, I've got a raffle, I've got an auction, whatever it might be. Each of those would be its own campaign code because they're different income streams, but I can then use the group code to tie them all together, so later on I can report on the group of donations or the group of campaigns and all the money that's gone into those. If you don't change it, by default, the system will just use the group code the same as the campaign code. Okay? In this case, I'm going to say no, because this is really just donations, I'm going to change the group code to suit. Okay. When you set it up, you do need a start date, and if you sort of put a start date that's in the future and you go to try and process to this campaign, the system will check that date and say, this campaign hasn't started yet. So ideally, use the date, even if I just said today's date, and T, hopefully everyone knows this, T in Donman is today's date. So if you just put a T in and enter, I don't necessarily need to have an end date, okay, because things like general donations or things like that will just go on and on and on. When it's a particular appeal or a newsletter or something like that, there are different aspects that I am trying to record so that I can report on them later. Okay. One of those, so in this case, if I just enter on end date, and I'll explain the rest of this screen as we go through. As soon as I enter there, the system will come up and say, is there something special about these transactions? So the first one, is it a pledge? So in this case, I'm going to say no. If I were to say yes, it will then take me through these other questions under that. If I say yes, just to show, okay, where I can then say, yes, it's a pledge. Is it, a one-off pledge? Is it subscription? Is it membership? Okay, so they're all subsets of a pledge. In this case, I'll go back and say, no, it's not. Again, in this case, it's not sales. Okay, I haven't got my raffle, so if I had my raffle system on or I had the products and I said, yes, it's sales, the system will then ask me, are there products associated with this campaign? If it's a raffle campaign, is it an in memoriam? Is it a function campaign? So if I'm doing a straight out donation or appeal, just enter all the way through. And the system will then show me at the top of the screen here, just under the start date, that this is just an ordinary campaign. If I've got a target for my campaign and I'm saying, well, we're hoping to raise, $10,000 from this campaign, I can put that in here as the target, and that will initiate on the right-hand side here the thermometer-looking thing, assay basically a visual indicator of where we are as far as achieving our target. At this initial point, I might not know how many people are going to be in the segment that I pull out of the database to do the mailing. Yeah. So if I leave that blank, it's of no consequence right at this moment. Okay. So if I just enter, the system will then show me that there are no figures here, so there's no number of donors, etc., because no money's been entered. If I had a comment about the campaign, I can put that in here. And the very next question says edit letter numbers, and if I say yes, this is where I start to tie the letter and the bank account and the ledger code into this campaign. So if I would click on the top one here, okay, so I can see there's my test letter. The difference between the very top field here and the next one that we'll enter means that if I had something that was, had slightly different text for a brand new donor, then I might have one called test new. So I can then choose that at this point, and the system will look at the time we process the payment and say, this record's never given a gift before, and give them the new, the test new letter instead of just the test. Otherwise, if I do it and just say, look, from any dollar amount to, just $1 million, everyone's going to get the same letter. I just use that there. In days gone by, we used to go through and basically put in different dollar amounts here. So I could say from, $0 to $49.99, people get this letter. From $50 to something, they get this letter. But we've found that over time, Word has got a lot smarter, nice tools in it, that it's much easier to put fields into your letter than it is to have a whole lot of different letters. So, time allowing today, we'll have a look at how you can put those sort of fields into your letters. So in this case, I'm purely going to say it's the one letter for everybody. If I enter through, the system will then next ask me which bank account, so I can then choose the appropriate bank account the funds for this campaign are going to go into, and then which ledger code. Yeah, so in this case, as I said, it's purely just donations. Okay. The details for receipts really just needs to say what is the purpose of the gift, because you've got a whole text of a letter saying thanks for your gift to us for whatever the purpose may be. So really the details for the receipts just needs to say, is it a donation, is it a sale, is it a raffle ticket, is it whatever it is, because if you're just writing the receipts manually, that's normally what you'd put in. Okay, so in this case, I just need to say that it's a donation. If I enter again, the system will now save that. So if I bring up my list again, type in a T, I can now see there's my test appeal. Okay. The other fields on the screen would be, here I've got campaign costs. So if I wanted to enter a cost against this campaign so I can track how much I'm spending in order to get to my profit figure, I can then go in here and say, today I had a cost of whatever the codes were. So you can set up the codes like I've got here where they're primarily English codes, say, okay, this is what I'm doing, or I can set it up where I'm using the same codes as the accounting system does for expenditure. 6 of one, half a dozen the other. It's really up to you which way you do them. If you were trying to reconcile against accounting, obviously it's easier to use the same codes, the same as we do for the income. Okay. But I could do something like that. Okay, for this campaign, I know I've got a postage cost. My postage cost was, $345, say, and any comments about that cost I could put in. If I enter and said that's the only cost I need to enter today, I can close, and you can now see up the top right-hand corner here, where next to cost, the system has put that amount in for me, and down the bottom, where the profit figure is, it's now got minus $345 because I haven't credited any income to this particular campaign yet. As far as the number mailed goes, normally the easiest way to update is wait until you've actually created your segment of the database of people that you are going to mail for this campaign. And one of the questions on the screen where you update the donor mail history asks you want to update the campaign based on how many people are in that file. So normally that will always tie the correct numbers together. If perchance you've put a number in and it's incorrect, you can come back in manually, click there and change the number to suit what it actually did to you. Because sometimes you might find that there were some duplicate records in the mail out or something else has changed and you want to do that. Yeah. So once I've put that together, just escape out. So now I'm up to here. If I needed to create different cost codes, okay, I can do that through here. Yeah. So again, create a code exactly as you need it. Okay. The other code on this menu is called the donation type code. It is one of the codes in the system that can be changed, so the name on the screen can be changed to suit what you're actually using it for, and it has quite a few uses. If perchance we were advertising, say, in different magazines, and we said, look, when the different replies come in, they're going to come in on a different coloured coupon or a different type of coupon or whatever it may be, in this list here, I can create codes to identify where that money's come from. So that means that I don't have to do 5 or 6 different campaigns. I could have one campaign, but use this donation type field as something extra to attach to the transaction as it comes in, so I can then do a breakdown report on how my replies came in for that particular one. That doesn't work so well when I'm sort of segmenting the data and saying, look, here's my lapsed donors, here's my current donors, my top donors, because for that sort of thing, normally I would have a separate campaign, because for each campaign I want to find out or keep track of how many people are mailed in that segment, and later on how many people have replied. So if I go back into campaign code, just to show, and just page down, it's going to start taking me through all the campaigns. Okay, so as I go through, it's showing me all the money I've got here. Okay, so you can see on this particular one here, I've got direct mail 98, and it was a group code of direct mail, or do-mail in this case. It's showing me the target was $2,500, and on the right-hand side, it's showing me that I'm at 64.9% at achieving the target that was set at that time. In this case, there has been no number entered for how many people were mailed or cost, so everything is showing as profit. So sometimes that's not exactly what we want. Plus, I'm not getting any idea of what my response rates were. So if I said, well, I've mailed 1,000 people for that, as soon as I enter the number, you can now see that the system has recalculated the percentage response for the new donors, and in this case, it's the same as the total because there was no new donors. Okay, so if you haven't put the figures in, straight up, or even if you forget to do it when you update the donor mail history, you can go back in and put those in, because that's something that's certainly worth reporting on later to find out what sort of response rates we are getting for these campaigns. Just like on a donor's record, when you look at the campaign record, if you click on the $sign at the bottom, we'll then show you all of the people who've made gifts and all of the details of that. When you're on this screen, you can then sort them by date or amount to find out who your highest or lowest donor was to a certain campaign. Okay? So sometimes you just want to know that and not have to do a report. Again, it'll give you the details down the bottom to say how many transactions, total given, and the average donation will be down the bottom. Okay. So that's really setting up the campaign itself, and where that starts to impact on me is when I'm processing the payments. So in this case, I'm quickly going to jump into processing. Okay. So record donations. Okay, in this case, I'll say I'm not entering new batch. I've got 109 already started. In this case, I've got one donation that's already been entered, and there's $20 pre-banked. So in this case, if I said I'm going to have 2 transactions, there's $100 to bank, and there's $20 pre-banked. Okay. If I was processing a batch just after I've done a mail out, especially if I've got different segments, the next question down will look at the last code that we've updated the donor with to say this is the last campaign we've mailed them, and it will make that the default for that person when you process their payment. So that can make it a whole lot easier when you're doing, that sort of response mails. By default, because you log into the system, it'll put your initials in as the operator. From there, it takes me in where I then find my donor. So the two ways to find them, of course, is if I've got a reply slip, I normally have the donor number and I can just enter that, or I can use multi-find, just search for my records, okay, and I can then find my donor. If you're on the screen and you've just added a donor, you can always page up. The system will take you to the last person on the system. If you page down, we'll take you to the first person. So sometimes if your data has been sort of set up from the initial point where donor 1 is anonymous, it makes it very easy to get to that record. Yeah? Otherwise, of course, we just use multi-find. In this case, I haven't got an anonymous record, which is very strange. So if I just use the record that's on the screen at the moment and enter through, okay. So when I get to the processing screen, basically I've got the donation date, which will go in by default. If the money that I'm entering is something to do with money that's been pre-banked or deposited in the account, you can change this date. There are two dates stored by the system. One is donation date, and the other one is the date is actually entered into the system. Okay. So in this case, if I say this person's giving me $100, I have got the option to split it into 2 parts or 3 parts at the top. To keep this one simple, I'm just going to say it's 1 part. They've paid me by check. If the person's paid by check, the system will automatically put the bank and branch details in from what I've entered last time. How you put this in is purely up to yourselves, but a lot of people are now finding it's much easier to just type in the BSB number off the check, because you've only ever got 6 digits to type, and it's always going to be correct. Okay. If the drawer name was different from what shows on the person's record, you can then change that to suit. Okay. In this case, I'm saying, yes, I need to bank this, and also, yes, I need to receipt the money. Okay. So as I go down, I can now choose the campaign. So if I choose my test one, okay, so I can now see that the ledger code comes up automatically, and this is where my letter starts to kick in. Okay. So basically, the better I set up the campaign, as Andrew was saying previously, the better this process certainly works, because everything's tied together nice and easily. Even sometimes in the case you might get something that's come in as a general donation that you want to choose a different ledger code. You've always got the option to bring up the list and choose a different code to put those funds into. But by default, whatever you've set up in the campaign, the system will use that as the default one. So that once you put in the campaign, you can just enter through, save the transaction, and say, okay, now I'm at the end of my batch, and finish that off. Okay. So from there, if I go into do my banking, okay, so normally we just print that out. Okay. So the next step down is where we create the merge data file, which starts to use what we've set up in the campaign and our letters to tie all of this together. Okay. So by default, when you go into the program, the name of the actual file will be at the top of the screen here, and by default, the system normally uses names. When you look in your working folder, because most of the time it's called DM Work, but for different people that have different companies or departments under their structure, it may be called a different different folder name, but normally the data file is always called names. And if you look in the directory, you'll normally see that there's names, and there's names 1 down to 7. For the purposes of receipting, names is always the current file. Names 1 to 7 are the last 7 lots of receipts we've done. So if something's gone wrong with our receipting procedure, etc., I can just go back into my receipt template and choose one of those other data files in order to do the merge. The system will keep track of the next receipt number, and it'd be very rare that you'd have to force it to change that number to go somewhere else. So as you enter through, the system by default, sorry, down the bottom here, will say load word and merge yes, and that will then show me the name of the document that is going to be tried to open when I finish this process. The next screen will purely show you all of the fields that are going to come out as part of the receipt file. Everything that's above the dotted line will come out no matter what. The fields below that are fields that, in this case, I've chosen to export because I'm using them for different things. So on your receipt, you can, put the person's pay method in, or, you can use the check drawer name or something that you've typed into the comments to also use those to customize your actual receipt letters. So the system will then show me that there should have been 5 people in my merge, and it will normally then come up and open up the actual receipt document. So up to this point here, Donman's finished what I needed to do as far as getting to use my campaign and start using my letters. So if I minimize that, big things. Okay. So normally the document that we've set up to use is normally called, just for most organizations, just called receipt.doc. That makes it very easy for somebody who's new to come in and try and find what the template's called. A lot of people, you may find that yours is called Thank WW something or a similar name. That is very historic. Years ago, when WordPerfect was on a sort of even keel with Word as far as doing the mail merges, there was a document called Thank WP for WordPerfect and Thank WW for Word, and the number was basically just telling us which version of Word. Nowadays, that's fairly irrelevant because I'd say 99% or more of organizations are using Microsoft Office as the tool to do that. But either way, even if you were using WordPerfect, the data that comes out of Donman can be used with Viva Program now, so there's no real need to make those sort of changes. In this case, I'll just go into my Donman folder, into DM Work. Okay, so again, you can see all my letters there. So if I go into my receipt, okay. So while we're looking at the list of files here, this is what I was sort of indicating before, that when I look at it, I've got receipt doc and I've got receipt docx. Okay. So there's quite a few documents that have got the docx on the end. Okay. So I've got letter Christmas doc and letter Christmas docx. In this case, because I've actually got the extension showing, I can see the difference between the two letters. Okay. And there is a fundamental difference between them behind the scenes. Okay. So if perchance you don't have the extensions, you'll say that's very strange because normally Windows won't let me have two documents called exactly the same name. All you'll see is the word icon, and they'll look exactly the same. That's normally where we start to find people get into trouble because someone's written a new letter and they've just saved it with a new format. And when I go to do the merge, it falls over to say, I can't find that particular document. They then go back to the folder and say, well, I can see it's there. It's normally the extension that's mucking you up, not the name of the file itself. Oh, sorry. So once your receipt document is set up, normally we'd mark it to say it's a read-only document because that's purely to do with layout. Because normally you don't need to change the layout of the receipt, you just need to open it to actually merge. So if I say yes, when it opens up, it's telling me at the top that this is a read-only document. So in this case, I'm getting my date, my name and address fields, my salutation, and in this case, you can see it's saying, oh, there's an error, there's not a valid file name, which means the last merge I did, it didn't find one of the actual letters. So in this case, if I go to mailings, and sorry, while I'm on that point, that is something that sometimes people open up the template, and instead of being in the view that I'm in where I can actually see that these are fields, they have this button here called Preview Results clicked in, and they'll say, oh, damn, there's something wrong because it's picked up the name and address, but the text here is wrong, or it's an old letter. Against all things that are trying to tell you there's something wrong, until you actually merge it, don't sort of try and fix something because it might not be broken. Because as I said, this text under the salutation where it's got the error is really to do with the last merge that I sort of put through the system. Okay. So If you normally edit the document and save it, make sure you save it so that it's in this mode here, not in preview mode, because you don't want to actually see that. Okay, down the bottom of the screen is normally there where you'd have your receipt, whatever your receipt layout looked like. In this case, if I go across to Finish and Merge, edit individual documents, and then do all. Okay. If there is an error in the document, so you can see the first person has actually picked up the text of their letter, the system's now telling me there's something wrong with the second record. Okay, and my fourth and my fifth record. So as I scroll down the screens, I can now see that I've got, for this person here, I've got this error. What I can't see at this point here is what the error is or what it's looking for that might not be there. The easiest way to do that is if you push Alt and F9 on your keyboard, will then take you into Field View, where I can now see the line. So it's saying the include text line is looking in the X drive, Donman DM work, to find lettergeneral.doc. So my first port of call would be to go and look in my DM work directory to make sure I have got a document called lettergeneral.doc and it's not lettergeneral.docx, because again that won't work. As I was saying before, if I have got all the documents and they're saved as docx in the receipt document itself, again I'll just do Alt F9. Okay, I can change that extension and say let's only do it for docx. So unfortunately you can't do it both ways. You can't have doc and a wildcard, because Word's very literal, it just won't merge the actual document. So in this case here, because I've got the error message and it's telling me which document it is, I'll then go to File, Open, and look in my X drive, Donman DM work. Okay, so it's saying I'm looking for a document called Letter General. In this case, I can see when I've saved the document, I've said, oh, I'm going to call it Gen Don instead of General. So you can see that's not going to work one way or the other. Okay, so if I were to open the document and say, what I need to do is one of two things. I either need to change the code in Donman to reflect that it's going to be Letter Gen Don, or I need to save this letter as Letter General. Yeah, so one way or the other. So if I said File, Save As, so if I save it as what I've set up in Donman, close that down, close my merge document because I know there's errors in there, merge that again. Okay, so in this case I've got no errors. So it's actually saying, yes, I did find the document, and you can see the text of the letters has come in exactly as I wanted to. If perchance you get to the point you're going, oh, there's something else gone wrong, or I've just given people the wrong letter code totally, and I don't want to go and edit the actual letter itself, what you can do is in your merge template, if you go into Edit Recipient List, you'll get this sort of view of the data. Okay, so you can go across, and you'll see the field there of which letter number different people are going to get for what they've given me. Okay. So in this case, if I said, well, letter general should have been letter test based on what I've processed, etc., or it's just come out wrong, if I click on names at the bottom and then edit, okay, scroll down to the letter number. If I then click on the button at the bottom of the screen, I'll just drag that to the center, okay, that's now going to scroll through the letters. So if I said, I've now saved it as letter general, but if I said, no, actually the name that's on there is the correct one and I need to fix that in Donman, I can then change that in the text file. Okay, just go through. And of course, if you had a lot to do this, this wouldn't be a viable option. But if there's only a couple of letters that are failing because I've just done something wrong or my setup's not incorrect, you can go in, just edit those and then go close. Okay, so I can now see that that's updated in my file. So when I go to merge, okay, so again I get to the point where it's still pulling in the text of the letter, but I'm not getting the error. So that's one of the most common areas where people get stuck, where they're saying, ah, it can't find the document. So really it comes down to, in Donman, when I set up the campaign, okay, tying up, make sure that when I do the letter code, whatever it might be called, general, GenDon, whatever, as long as my document is called exactly the same name and the extension is the same for all of them. For quite a few places, people are saying, okay, look, the DM work directory is becoming a very busy folder. So one of the options is also to, under your DM work directory, minimize all this, okay, so if I go into my Donman DM work, okay, so if I then created a new folder in here, okay, folder, my computer's going sleepy guys today, I'm not quite sure, but normally when that comes up, I just create a new folder called letters, okay, or receipt letters, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, then I can save the actual letters in there, and in my receipt, where I've got the field that says go and look in this directory, instead of just being DM work there, okay, I can tell it to go and look in that folder. And lots of people have sort of said that in the long term that becomes much easier, because all my receipt documents are basically now in one area. They're not mixed up with the actual whole kit and caboodle of everything else that's in the DM work directory. So if you decide to do that, it's really just a matter of moving all the current documents into the new folder, changing your template to say basically that's where it goes. Okay, so hopefully that's given everyone a bit more of an insight into how the letter works and how it sort of impacts with the campaign, and why the campaign setup itself is so important to do correctly. Okay, so if we hand back to Marla now, and we'll answer any questions that people might have had.
Thanks, Gary. Yes, there are a few questions. We'll, of course, have to go back to the beginning, so you'll have to hark back to remembering what you did earlier to answer those questions. Okay, first one was from Adrian. Gary, how can you add mergeable fields from Donman into the letter, such as the donation amount? I think you've kind of answered that, so
okay.
If you just want to reiterate.
Yep. So if I've got a letter and I want to put fields in, as far as saying thanks for your donation of X dollars, etc., it's really taking my letter itself okay, so I've got my text, and I'm saying after that bit of text I now want to put a letter in. So what I need to do is turn this document into a merged document of its own right. So if I go to mailings, select recipients. If you're on the older version of Word, it'll be Open Data Source. Okay, so on this version, it's basically select recipients, use existing list. Okay, then I'd browse to, if I could go there, because I've selected a drive that doesn't have attached. So when that comes back, okay, so if I, and I said, okay, what I'm looking for is my drive, my Donman DM work directory. So I have to go back. So you can see, like I was saying before, that I've got names being the current file, and then I've got names 1 down to 7 being the last 7. So if I'm doing it, always use the names file. Once I've done that, you can see I've now got more of the buttons available on the merge toolbar. And if I click on here, I can now go and put in the fields that I'm looking for. So when I merge that, again, I can preview. You can see it's now pulling in the dollar total. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, and Elizabeth asks, with the print code options, does that print all codes, including the ones you may have archived?
Good question. I'm not quite sure.
And kind of a follow-up question to that, Sarah asks, can you delete or archive campaign codes so that the old codes don't appear on the list?
Okay. With the actual printing of the codes, well, if I just go in and give it a belly. I think by default, if I just save it, I think by default it's only doing it there. We'll show you, if you go into the housekeeping menu and go into descriptive codes, there's a program there where you can print out any codes, and it does have the option to say do you want to print archive codes or not? Yeah, so if the code's been archived, it's, as you can see, only printing out the list of codes that are still active, not the ones that have been turned off. Okay, sorry, Marla, the next one was?
Okay, sorry, I just muted myself, so plane going over. Okay, Bronwyn was asking, what was the soft credit option that was on the donation page? That, again, was earlier in your presentation.
Okay. In order to process a soft credit, what you need to have is a relationship link between donors on your system. Okay, and it is an option that may be turned on or off in your system. Okay, so if I've got a relationship between donors, when I process the money, I then have got an option to basically say, I want this money soft credited to another donor record on the system. It's the same sort of mechanism that we use for Everyday Hero, so that when I look up the actual fundraiser or the hero, I can see how much money that person's raised based on all the people who have given money, as their supporter or their sponsor. You can do the same sort of thing on an individual basis when you're processing, and you'll only get that option to do the soft credit if you have got the relationship set up. So if you had, say, a record where you've got a company and you've got employees doing payroll, you can then soft credit the payroll payments from the employees back to the company's record. So when you look at the person's history, down the bottom here, this is a very full one, but where all the tabs are, you'll then have one called soft credit. So it'll show you how much money has been sort of credited to this record as a soft credit, and the donations one will show you how much they've actually given you themselves.
Can I just say something here?
Absolutely.
The word soft credit, where it comes from is the idea that it's not a real credit. For example, this originally came from our school system, where sometimes we have a husband and a wife who both felt that a donation made by one was really a donation to the other, and they both had a record. The problem is that if you enter the donation twice, it's wrong, because you've only got one donation. You can't put the donation as a real donation against two records, because then you'd be doubling up and your financial reporting will be wrong. So a soft credit is like saying it's a pretend credit. Let's put a version of this donation against another person that won't really be a new donation. It's simply just the old donation reflected, mirrored onto the other person's record, so that you can see that amount with a special tab, but it's not really a new donation. It's simply a soft version of the old credit. Okay.
Okay, next question, Gary. Bear with me on this one, because I'm not quite sure how this goes. Anthony is asking, when you make a change to the letter after adding to the campaign code, do you need to go back to the campaign code page and re-enter through reattaching the letter to the campaign, or is it still recognised as the same letter?
As such, you don't change the name of the letter. It's still attached to the campaign forever and a day. So in the case of where you have the letters, okay, so if I have a look at my codes here, so say in the case here I've got a tax letter and I've got a Christmas letter. Really, the last thing I want to do is create one called tax 12, tax 13, tax 14, tax 15. Create all these codes that I'm only ever going to use once, because really what I do is update the content of that letter when I create my new campaign for this year. Okay? So if I just update the content of the letter and haven't changed the code, and it's attached to the campaign already, or even the new campaign, then that makes it much easier to manage.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is going beyond the scope or not, but a couple of questions regarding the merging. Colleen's asking, why does the merged letter display different fonts, and what is the best way to rectify? And Ash is asking, she loses the formatting when the letter was merged.
Okay. What normally causes that is people play with the actual receipt template. I'll try and explain. And again, this is something that does come up quite often. In Word, when you've got something like we've got the include text line to pull in different text of letter, so that when you do the merge, everything sort of comes through. Okay. If I've got a field here and I said, look, I've got some text showing there, then it would go there and people will say, oh, I just want to edit that text. But as you can see, when I click on there, just like the other fields, it's really just the result of a field the text of the letter isn't there. But if I change something on there, let's see if this will work for me, because I've done everything I can to try and kill that from happening in my system. Okay. So if I do something and try and update that, okay, what will happen at the end of this line here, Word will automatically put something like / asterisk. It'll put a command in like that. What that was originally designed to do in Word, and this goes way back to Office 97, I think, was keep the formatting of your original document. What it has done is, like everyone has seen, sometimes you'll get bold in the middle of one word in one person's letter. It might be a whole word in the next person's letter, or it might be italics or anything at all. It totally mucks it up. If you're getting that, the first thing to try is open your receipt document, press Alt F9, or if you've got this View Field Code button on your toolbar, utilize that, go in there, and just delete that bit of text. So basically it should finish at .doc or .docx, quotation mark, and the bracket. If you're getting a mixture of fonts and that field's not there, what you might find it may be the style, not the actual font. So at the top of the document here, you can see it's based on the normal style. This really comes into play when you have different versions of Word, or people just with different, because everyone's computer's got their own version of Word, and the settings are slightly different. If, because we're trying to be nice and consistent, and I want everyone to be using the same font and the same style, what I should make sure of is that if you go in here, right-click, you'll then get an option to modify. If you go to Format Paragraph, you'll then see Format on here. You'll see that the formatting is saying my default is Times New Roman, and the size is 12. But my document said it's Helvetica 12. Yeah, so when I merge, sometimes the text in the middle, where the letter is, will refresh itself based on the style, not the actual font that I've set it at. So the best advice I can give is to make sure that all the computers that are doing the receipting or any of the other documentation, all of them are set on exactly the same here. So I said, look, everyone's going to be Calibri 11. Okay. Make sure that I've said new documents based on the template, okay. Okay. So that then normal will become Calibri 11. It won't be what it is. But that is the most common thing that happens. It's either the merge format command that's gone into your field here, or there is different styles between the actual documents. So if you set the style, just make sure that your receipt document itself is, if I highlight my field there, okay, and make sure that style, so you can see now, straight away, Word's put that /* merge format back in. Okay, so as soon as I change that field, it does that. So I have to make sure, so I'm not going to tear my hair out later, that I get rid of that and then save the document. Okay, so hopefully if you can do one of those two things, that will solve you from getting that sort of strange error.
Okay, thanks, Gary. And there is a couple of additional questions which we'll follow up offline because we are running out of time. But Gary, there was just one small question when you pressed the Alt button earlier. What was the key that you pressed with it?
It's F9.
There you go. That was for Mary.
Key 9.
Okay, great. Andrew, did you want to add a few words before we finish up?
Just to thank everybody for coming, and just remind you all that we've modified the peer-to-peer module in Donman to now handle GoFundraise as well as Everyday Hero. If anybody is interested in that module until June the 30th, we've got a special on 35% off. It's normally $850 for modules in Donman. This is now $550. The plus on that is if you purchase the module, it'll work for both. You get both programs. So if you swap back and forward from GoFundraising or Everyday Hero or use both, then you have an import program for both. So that's available to June the 30th. If you're interested in purchasing that, contact Val, vturner@advsol.com. And thanks everybody for coming.
Great. Thanks, Andrew, and thank you, Gary. And I'll just give another plug as well for our next webcast, which is on Wednesday the 19th of June at 2 p.m. Melbourne, Sydney time. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time. So we'll have details sent to you in your inbox shortly about that. And as we've mentioned before, all of our webcasts, including today's webcast, are recorded and are available from our website. If you go to the What's New section on the Donman website, and you'll also find links in our monthly newsletter for that. So that leaves us at 3 o'clock now total, and as I said, there was a couple of questions we weren't able to get to today, but we will follow those up offline. So thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.